there is a common misperception that MDMA has a serotonergic depletion effect on your brain. I think that's a misperception because most of the time people take it when it's late at night or they're super drunk and there are other factors involved, so that of course you're going to be tired the next day. Like mostly psychedelics do not actually cause a physical depletion other than just natural tiredness from physical exertion. But they do for me create I have a organic sort of lull, which has to do with any if I go in super vulnerable on something, the next day I have what I like to call a vulnerability hangover, where I'll just be like, oh God, did I open up too much? Did I like burden somebody with something? And it's no, usually it was a shaman I paid good money to cry to. So I'm sure I was fine objectively, but subjectively, I always invariably I have a difficult integration.
Was the first time you tried psychedelics after this transitionary period you spoke about, or had you done it
Yes.
before recreationally and then done it
Um,
therapeutically after that?
no, it was after there was one time, there was one outlier where I tried LSD right at this point, not therapeutically, just recreationally. And then it was years up until I was actually, no, it was only a year until I was 25 or 26 that I started getting interested in them much more seriously, academically, and therapeutically.
So what was that? Tell me about, I guess, that first time at that point. What did
Yeah,
you decide to try? And was this very intentional of, I have depression, I'm trying to solve this?
no, no, this was like, I didn't, at this point when I was 24, I didn't really know that I had depression. I just knew there were certain behaviors that were indicators. Like, for example, I would be the last person to leave every party because could not be alone with myself. And so I would not have thought about that as a indication of depression. That's me being a huge extrovert. Depressed people stay home and don't eat or something. So at this point I had depression, but I did not quite know it. And I was just at a art festival in Bushwick, and it was in this like empty lot with a bunch of construction materials. It was very Bushwick, straight out of a Girls episode. And a friend of mine named Yusuf, who's just like the smartest guy I know, offered me to try some acid. And it was a fascinating experience because I went into a bouncy castle, like one of those, it was like a giant inflatable castle where people are bouncing around. And I came out not with a fun bouncy experience, but an extremely intricate theory about game theory and mathematics.
Okay.
Because I went into the bouncy council and I started observing patterns of behavior of how people were bouncing because everybody went in assuming there was an objective and assuming universalizing, assuming everyone else knew this objective. One person thought it was a competition to see who could bounce the highest. Another person thought it was who could bounce in the center. And then a third person thought it was who could bounce another person the highest. But what was interesting is these various objectives didn't interfere with each other. In fact, they created little patterns of behavior where they were getting by, not noticing that somebody else had a different objective, but coexisting. And I realized there were like analogies to this type of game theoretic behavior in life. The way real estate agents you think have the exact same objective as you do have a slightly different objective to turn over houses quickly. And so they may actually get you a worse price for your house, but you would never know that because of how they interact with you. So I had this like theory about game theory. And years, like about a year later, I met this guy, Spencer Greenberg, actually, for coffee. And I remember he was a PhD in mathematics at NYU at this point. And I was like, hey, this is crazy. I came up with this idea about game theory once while on acid. And I really did expect him to be like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, just so I could confirm it was dumb. But he wouldn't do that. He was like, no, that's a genuinely interesting. That's like, he even said at the time, like, that is something you could write a PhD on. And it was at that moment that I was like, oh, holy shit. This is like these materials are extremely powerful.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, it was, and so I'm deeply indebted to that experience in a lot of ways and to Yusuf. I will say one thing that happened to me towards the end of that experience with Yusuf was that we were walking home at night, and I had known him for a couple of months and we'd become close, but we weren't quite fully close yet. So I do caution people to take psychedelics with somebody really well, and then maybe a new friend. We were walking home and it dawned on me suddenly that he's a man and he's taller than me and he could kill me if he wanted to. And I just couldn't stop thinking about this. Because and we would just be like talking about like the colors in the grass, and I'd be like, oh my God, he could kill me if he wanted to with his bare hands. Oh my God. And I couldn't stop thinking about this. And so eventually I got to the point where I was like, you just have to do something about this. But I was worried he would think I was racist because he's Black. And so I reconciled this great dilemma in my head by running away from him screaming, it's not because you're Black, it's because you're a man, which is just the most delicate way of handling that situation. Just so refined. Anyway, we met up later and he was like, yeah, what was that about? And I was like, I'm sorry, I got worried about men, and we hashed it out. It was okay. And he's still a very good friend. I love him. But it was, yeah, definitely a lesson that
In
day.
this